Good evening to our viewers in North America. My name's Don Arleth and you're watching Flash News, where we bring you local events from Poland and around the world. We begin tonight with an update on the coronavirus restrictions in Poland. New restrictions have been placed on 10 counties throughout the country, which are divided up into high and medium risk zones. Doctors can now order COVID testing and employers can decide on remote work until the pandemic subsides.
Pajęczno city in the province of Łódź. The inhabitants of this district will be subject to strict restrictions in the upcoming week. This means, among other things, the obligation to cover their mouths and noses in public space. You have to walk in a mask all the time and it's burdensome. If this helps, then we will manage somehow. Nowy Sącz still remains in the red zone. Here, the increase of infections is still large. This is a problem for many couples who are planning a wedding. In the red zone, a maximum of 50 people can be present. Further parties are simply cancelled, postponed or moved to other regions. The chief sanitary inspector recommended to the government that the limit of 50 people at weddings should not apply in the red zone but throughout the entire country. He also recommended the wedding guests should be registered. Remote work will continue. Regulations have come into force that will enable employees to continue their home office working mode. I like working remotely, but as it is known, sometimes there is a lack of contact with friends from work and with the entire team. Family doctors can already order tests for the coronavirus. Such a decision was made by the Minister of Health. This is one of the elements of the strategy to help in the fight against COVID in autumn. This is a very flexible response to the situation we have, and the situation is fortunately evolving in the right direction, but I think it is the right move. In the ministry's latest report, 567 new coronavirus infections have been confirmed, most of them in the Małopolskie and Mazowieckie voivodeships.
The 9th annual national reading took place on Saturday and was opened by the presidential couple. This year it was all about Balladyna by Juliusz Słowacki, which was read in almost 3,000 places in Poland and around the world.
Balladyna is undoubtedly one of the most outstanding works of Polish Romanticism. It is a timeless story that depicts the best of Romanticism. It also refers strongly to the tragedy of Polish history and romantic longing for a free homeland. Literature, which I am certain about, is an absolute element of our identity, our Polish culture and our Polish soul. As part of the national reading campaign, Balladyna was read in thousands of places in Poland and worldwide. Traditionally, this year's edition was inaugurated by the presidential couple in Warsaw. In its interpretation, Balladyna becomes multi-layered. It refers to our folklore, traditions, but also to the mythical origins of the Polish state. Poles have read more in recent years. These are the results of the latest research. Reading is like bread and butter. Reading is like drinking water from a spring. So it is worth not only to reach for novelties, but also for the classics.
Saturday marked the 28th day of anti-government protests in Belarus. Unofficial information suggests that about 20 students were detained by police. Meanwhile, one of the opposition leaders has fled to Warsaw.
Olga Kowalkowa from the Belarusian Coordination Council was sentenced to 10 days for organizing an illegal gathering. The Belarusian court, without agreements, added another 15 days to the sentence. Finally, the KGB appeared in the cell. They threatened me and told me one condition: either I will leave the country immediately or they will prolong the arrest indefinitely. Kowalkowa says that she was tortured for several days in jail. Yesterday she was released. The KGB officers entered the cell where I was being held. They put a bag on my head so that I could not see anything. I had to lie down on the floor of the car into which they threw me. I did not know where we were going. The car arrived at the Polish border in Kuźnica. The Belarusians literally threw the woman out of the country, leaving her behind the border barrier. Olga Kowalkowa received help from a random driver of a Polish bus. She came to Warsaw. Every person who has been subject to political repressions in Belarus can count on the support and care of the Polish state. In recent days, one of the leaders of the local opposition, Paweł Łatuszka, left Belarus and came to Poland. I was observed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was followed by a car with 4 policemen. My house is under surveillance all the time and my phone is bugged. In the meantime, more demonstrations and arrests are taking place in Minsk, among others of students, for example, for reading the Constitution or singing the Marseille song. women protested again in the Belarusian capital.
Reżim białoruski przez 25 lat.
For 25 years, the Belarusian regime has effectively eliminated structures and leaders, and for the first time it has faced a situation where there is no public support and no leader structures, and we are in a power vacuum. An ecumenical mass was celebrated in Minsk for the intention of all victims of the protests in Belarus, killed, wounded and arrested, as well as for the intention of Archbishop Tadeusz Kondrusiewicz, president of the Bishops' Conference of Belarus, who is not allowed by the Lukashenko regime to return to the country.
In less than a month, on October 3rd, the Pope will go to Assisi, and there he will sign the new encyclical on fraternity. This would be Francis's third encyclical after Lumen Fide and Laudato Si. Although the second encyclical is exclusively his, he received the first as the legacy of Benedict XVI.
The papal encyclical is to begin with the words of Saint Francis of Assisi, "We are all brothers," and to refer to the Declaration of Human Fraternity signed by the Pope and the great Imam of Al-Zahar University last year. The declaration was strongly criticized for stating that the diversity not only of skin color, race or gender, but also of religion is good and intended by God. Universal fraternity is a frequent theme of papal catechesis, especially during pandemics. The date of signature of the new encyclical is not accidental. It is the day before the day of Saint Francis of Assisi.
El Salvador is opening prisons for television cameras and intimidating inmates with harsh conditions. The government claims that its tough approach is bearing fruit. The local media, however, has published documents to prove that the government is negotiating with gangs, including MS-13. Here are the details.
The prisons in El Salvador are overcrowded and conditions are difficult. The testimonies of the detainees show that many of them died from diseases such as tuberculosis. Some of them became infected with coronavirus. Therefore, according to the local newspaper El Faro, the criminals got along with the government and, in exchange for better prison conditions, reduced violence against co-inmates. The documents published by the newspaper are also supposed to testify about talks held in order to support the government in next year's parliamentary elections. The president of El Salvador called those reports a fiction. The prison management also denied any alleged cooperation with the gangs. The general prosecutor announced an investigation. In recent years, several El Salvadorian politicians were accused of getting along with gang members.
There are already more than 26.5 million people infected with coronavirus worldwide. Almost 870,000 people have died from COVID-19. The head of the World Health Organization said that all countries must join forces in the fight against the pandemic, and vaccine nationalism will only prolong this fight.
The Czech Republic, France, Spain, Great Britain. The weekend in these countries started with disturbing news. Since the beginning of the pandemic, there have never been so many coronavirus infections. Daily records are falling. In France, almost 9,000 new cases, and in Spain, even over 10,000. In Prague, the most infected of all Czech cities, an orange alert was introduced. From September 9th, the obligation to wear masks in stores, public transport, offices and medical facilities will return.
There is more to come here on Flash News, but first, as the world economy continues to struggle because of the pandemic, tourism is one of the hardest hit industries. Many popular tourist destinations are totally empty, and the season for sightseeing, at least in Europe, is slowly coming to an end.
The Belgian city of Brugge, due to the multitude of canals called Flemish Venice, like its Italian cousin, is suffering from a lack of tourists. Hotels and restaurants are empty. The charm of the historic city, the cradle of Flemish paintings, does not attract visitors. This year in Brugge there were 70% less tourists than a year ago. However, there is hope that it will be a little better this autumn when the city will be filled with the scent of chocolate. One of the sushi restaurants in the Japanese city of Anzhou is looking for ways to deal with the pandemic crisis. Less guests come to the restaurant than before the coronavirus, so the restaurant went to them. To distribute the dishes, the restaurant owner hired champions of bodybuilding. He called the service Delivery Macho. The only question remains whether sushi served that way tastes differently. What will soothe the elephant? This is the question that the employees of the zoo in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan, have tried to answer for a long time. The 36-year-old elephant called Kavan was clearly unhappy after the death of his beloved. It was by no means a coincidence that Frank Sinatra's song, entitled My Way, brought him relief. When one of the vets sang it, the animal was clearly happy and found a way out of the melancholy. He was born 2 weeks ago, but the staff of the Chester Zoo in the UK have only just seen him or her, because for now the gender of the chimpanzee cannot be established. The mother, 43-year-old Mandy, does not let the baby out of her arms. The choice of the name has to wait. For the zoo, the gender does not matter. Birth is a joy anyway, because chimpanzees are a species critically threatened with extinction.
Well, that's all the time we have in today's program. Thank you for watching Flash News, and we'll see you next time. Good night.